Hello to everyone out there. Welcome to another Voge Academy Talks. And good morning, Nick. How are you?
Morning, Matt. Good to see you.
All right. Well, today we are going to talk about our pitch deck that we've created for an event a week from tomorrow, which is the Keller Center Innovation Forum. Nick will be on stage talking about Voge Academy, and then that night we're also in another event. We'll be featured in another event called Celebrate Princeton Innovation. So if you're looking for something to do a week from Wednesday, October 22nd, come to what's it called, the multi-purpose room down in Frist that morning.
Frist Campus Center, yeah.
That's right. We'll be there, and I'll be in the crowd cheering Nick on. I'll have banners and horns, and confetti machines, or whatever it's called, when he talks. And then that night it's Frick, in the Frick not auditorium, the atrium there will be featured. And so we thought, as we were working on it this weekend, why not just share our findings and insights and wrestling and ambiguities about who we are and what we're doing with you all. Before we do that, though, I just want to share some news with Nick and with you all that we have now over 1,500 subscribers to the Voge Academy YouTube channel, which is really exciting. And we just started late spring, and already we got 1,500. So really just want to thank everyone for subscribing, and tell your friends about us. We feel like we're doing something really special here, and that's we're really passionate about, but also because it can be so helpful to everyone. So let everyone know. And again, Nick's talk, initial talk that kind of kickstarted our whole venture here, his talk on procrastination, a TEDx talk at Princeton, has over 3.2 million views. So that's pretty exciting as well. So good stuff. All right.
Yeah.
So what we'll do, we'll have the slides. We'll show you the slides as I edit this video. But really, the progression of the slides is to talk about our philosophy, like what we're all about, and then the particular subjects that we're focusing on with our philosophy, and really our understanding of human nature, our anthropology, and then the platform, Voge Academy platform, and then kind of where we're going in the future, where we're hope we'll be in 2 years. Anyway, all right. So I don't know if you have the deck in front of you, Nick.
I'm trying pulling that up right now. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that prompted this topic for the podcast is Matt and I were talking through the slides, and it really led to us trying in a succinct way to convey what's distinctive about what our approach. And Matt alluded to that, like, how do we think about especially what motivates human beings, motivates behavior change, what motivates people to do the kind of work that's fulfilling and meaningful, and that we think that's the key to helping people overcome procrastination or other objectives, but be productively and enthusiastically engaged. And that's pretty different than the ascendant ideas around dopamine fasts and habits. It's not that those things aren't meaningful, but what motivates one to even do that, to engage in these processes. And so I thought it was really enjoyable and fun to get back to that. These are themes and threads that Matt and I are frequently talking about, but we realized in our effort to communicate that to a novice audience, I thought we got down to some pretty fundamental points and some concise ways of communicating it. So hopefully we can do that again today.
Right, if we can remember. So assume that our first slide's up here, Nick, and we say, the title is, why we struggle and why it matters. And, there's obviously these particular areas of struggle that are prominent, or, a lot of people wrestle with, like procrastination, impostor syndrome, burnout. And as you alluded to, the fact that a lot of the self-help out there, be it in books or YouTube videos and elsewhere, it's can tend to focus on cognitive strategies or behavioral strategies. And those might work. I mean, we're not saying that those are necessarily
absolutely
bad. We're just saying that they because they don't take in the whole of human nature, they will work for some people, but not for others. And when they don't work, it's easy to go into this hole where you're condemning, you're further condemning yourself and like, oh, what's wrong with me? This should work, but it's not. So I'm really the problem, and not realizing, well, no, it's just that there's other dimensions of your being that this doesn't appreciate and highlight. So, and it's not really helping you figure out where you might struggle in other dimensions of yourself, something like that. Right. So anyway, you want to elaborate?
Yeah, so I think, and in particular, from a self-worth theory of motivation, and in particular achievement motivation, there are these dynamics that are counterintuitive that people aren't aware. You ask people about motivation, and no one mentions self-worth. Yeah, that's a really powerful paradigm in psychology. It's so common, it's almost often not even raised up to be mentioned, but it's really common and powerful and used a lot, but people don't know about it. And so it's a frame and an underlying basis for other motivations that people are aware of: extrinsic, intrinsic, approach, avoidance. But underneath that often is this sense of self and the protection of that, in particular around competency. And so with that lens, things start to make sense. It's not the only lens, it's not the only perspective. Sometimes I describe motivation theory as kind of like spaghetti. There's all these different dynamics operating. We're complex beings, but self-worth is one of them that needs to be considered. And once you do, you can this seemingly mismatch of noodles makes some sense. It gets a little clearer, and we can understand. And one of the consequences too is some compassion for ourselves. We say, oh, I'm responding to circumstances that is completely understandable, that I would want to protect myself. Human beings want to protect themselves. That makes sense. I don't have to judge myself, but I can also see that it's predictable, but not inevitable, and it's not helpful. Okay, but it's not shameful. There's something wrong with you. You're responding to the situation. And then we have the power as human beings to influence our cognition, our emotions. We can actively tap into motivation. So from my point of view, it's a very practical lens as well. So sometimes people hear the word theory and they're like, oh, okay, that's a way of, it's not practical. It's not applicable. I don't think so. I think the lens is quite illuminating and clarifying. And with that lens, you can look at common but unhelpful dynamics. As you mentioned, procrastination, impostor syndrome, burnout, why we overextend. And then that provides a different kind of insight than you typically learn about in the popular press or what have you.
Yeah, I was thinking about our time working with a men's lacrosse team. And I think we've mentioned this before, but one of our first talks was on alcohol and drug use at the college and even amongst the team. And they were prepared for a scared straight kind of discussion, and we didn't do that at all. Instead we initially talked about, like, what are humans essentially about? And they were very quickly got to that we were about meaning, purpose, and fulfillment. And they didn't say self-worth specifically, but they were there. And we're like, great. And then we kind of left that. And then we asked about what are the motivations for drinking. We didn't really explore drug use, but we're more about drinking. At that college, it was Saturday night, and they gave all the kind of, I would say, surface motivations of, well, you're kind of, we're stressed. You need you need time to just kind of unwind. You might be slightly inhibited. And so alcohol kind of loosens you up and allows you to, maybe go talk to that person you're interested in, or dance when you wouldn't otherwise dance at a party, all these kind of things. And we're like, okay, now then we asked, well, how does that cohere with what you said earlier, that, we're creatures are seeking meaning, purpose, and fulfillment. And that's a ever-present, constant dynamic within the self. It's not intermittent. And you could see they were like, whoa, so it's very easy to think of these surface motivations, or I don't know if surface is the right word, but just kind of like right below the surface, easy to tap into motivations, but it's harder to get down to that deeper level of I would say, really in your heart, in the core of your being, where you are struggling to have a sense of worth, and a constant sense of worth, and knowing that in a way is always on the line. And so all these ways of being, ways of acting, thinking, your emotions, they're all resultant or a product or of that internal dynamic. That's really hard, I think, for people to get at. And that's, we talk about self-awareness and just how hard that is. But anyway, that was a really great exercise, and it was interesting for me to see how, one, it was easy to get to that kind of initial layer of motivations, but much harder for them to connect that with a deeper level of motivation of self-worth, and maintaining a sense of self-worth.
And I think, to take it from a psychological point of view, those are harder to measure and study, and the methods that we use are harder to uncover that meaning, purpose, fulfillment as a motivator and sense of worth. Empirically, those are harder to demonstrate. But also, you can only think with the concepts and frameworks that you have available to us. So it's just not widely known. That's one piece, I think. But also maybe it's a little, perhaps it's sensitive, it feels very personal. If you're trying to protect your worth, talking about your worth itself could be maybe somewhat threatening or worrisome to you. And I think, from the self-worth perspective, particularly in achievement context, that's worth associated with capability. And the main point, or a big idea, is that people avoid these performances or assessments of their capability, because to be incapable, to be inadequate, is highly shameful. So that a sense of being capable is fraught with shame. So there's lots of reasons that would kind of repel people. You would avoid even talking about it, or that you feel incapable at times. That's affirming this very aversive, socially stigmatized feeling and experience. And so you can see that there's a few reasons why people wouldn't be thinking and examining their own experience and introspecting, reflecting, particularly publicly, with this way of thinking.
Yeah, and just before we move on, I think another barrier to becoming introspective is purely optics, and orientation. Like, we are oriented to be looking out the world, literally. So it's easy to think that some change in my lived world, my context, will bring about that stability and sense of worth that I need. Oh, if I just get a new job, or we if only a new partner, or if I get a partner, or like all these ways in which if we just need to manipulate our lived world, then everything's going to be just fine. Not realizing that, if we talked about, everything in our lived world, including our relationships, are to a certain degree transient, contingent, fragile. And I think deep down we know that, and that creates this, we've talked about this little, this kind of deep, low-level anxiety, and thus the need to manage our lived world. And it's harder, given that orientation and our fixation with that orientation, to change the optics, to change the perspective and look inward and try to understand that I am in my lived world, but I'm actually in some way distinct from my lived world, and there are dynamics going on inside me that I need to address that can make me a bit more stable amidst the fluctuation of our lives. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you need to become a stoic, read your Seneca and Marcus Aurelius and whatnot, but it's to say that there is a sense in which your inner world is distinct from your outer world, and can you become attentive to it enough to understand what's going on and how that really informs your orientation in your lived world. I don't know if that makes sense, but so anyway,
I think so.
Yeah, it makes a barrier.
Well, I
right,
was pick up one thread on that, if I
sure,
may, before we go on to the next topic. Well, it's not only the Stoics who have made this insight. The
right,
Buddhists have
right.
as well. There's several hundred million of them, and thousands of years. I think. I think this is not a very popular idea at the moment. At least it's for some, but it's not very prevalent. But this idea that we are not our emotions, we're not our thoughts, but more fundamentally, what you're saying about creating a world that we can escape ourselves into.
Yeah.
So this is a really fundamental idea, is that if you're constantly looking for a way to avoid the experiences you have or certain feelings you're having that are unpleasant, they're aversive, then you're always looking to go or do or be something else. And that's a really powerful motivation, and it can be for positive good and growth and improvement in various ways, but it can also be a never-ending treadmill of aversion. And as you said, then these external factors and features of our context, our community, these are out of our control, they're contingent, they're in flux, they're changing. And so they're not a secure place for us to find fulfillment, meaning, purpose, to find security, equanimity, calm, ease. These are some of the words that Buddhists use. And so that turns you one back inward, right?
Right.
So, okay, what's within my influence? What's within my control? Yeah.
Well, one more story before we move on. It just made me think about, I don't know if I've mentioned this to you or even here on these talks. I dove competitively all the way through college. And diving is this really interesting sport where you train and train and train and train. I mean, hours, especially in college. Boy, I mean, I had days where I had 4 workouts. Weights in the morning, dove later in the morning, then gymnastics right after lunch, and then I had another practice. So wow. I mean, it was very intense, and yet all that training culminates in these meets where whether you're going to do well or not can be determined in like a fraction of a second. Like you just miss one dive, or you're just slightly, and you know that your success or failure is going to come down to this little bit of moment. And even though it's kind of in your control, it kind of feels out of your control. And so that realization leads to anxiety, at least for me. And I think it was prevalent amongst a lot of divers. And so, and to compensate, you become very superstitious.
Mm.
And so you go through all these rituals. I mean, it's funny now when I look back, like I would do the same thing before every dive in a competition. You had these like what are called chamois, these little towels that bring out water, and and you had to do it a certain way, and you put the chamois a certain way after you're getting ready to do your dive, and like all these rituals that helped you feel confident because of the moment after you're like, somehow I'm going to be successful in the dive. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's versus other sports which have a lot of the more opportunity for flow, like let's say basketball, or my sons who played rugby would talk about how you just kind of get into the game. There's this flow, and you might make mistakes, but you can just you just got to move on and keep doing it. So there's this flow state you can reach, which you never had in diving. And another sport where I know there's a lot of superstition is baseball, because you could be a right fielder who's sitting there and nothing happens all game, and then the game comes down to you, whether you make that catch or you block that ball to make sure it doesn't pass you. And so that again, it really creates all these superstitions. And in fact, I remember a buddy of mine, I worked in options trading right out of college, and he was in the Chicago office, and he actually played for the Oakland A's. I'm not sure if he made it all the way up to the pros, but he was what's the guy's name? Canseco. It was
Jose Canseco.
Jose, he was his roommate at some point. But even in options trading, he was incredibly superstitious. Like, it was just funny. It was just this way of being that continued into his options trading career. But anyway, that's all to say that the ways that we understand that the world is contingent. We realize it, and your self-worth is at stake. Like as a diver, that was part of my being. That's who I was. Was I a successful diver or not a successful diver? And there are other issues involved as well, like, you know, whether your coach is going to get mad at you, parents, expectations, all this kind of stuff. And so, yeah, it breeds a lot of anxiety. And so this you create these rituals, these superstitions in order to help you compensate. Anyway, thought that just popped in my head, so I thought I would share that.
Yeah, that's an effort to manage that external part that's not in some way, some magical way. Yeah.
All right, so should we move on to, that's slide number one. It was really just kind of the philosophy, here's, we're really focusing on self-worth theory, that, we are creatures who fundamentally are about our self-worth, meaning, purpose, fulfillment, other synonyms and ways to kind of get at that dynamic. And this is a constant, this is always going on, even when you're not consciously aware of it. In fact, most of us are not consciously aware of it. And that's part of the issue, is you have to become self-aware to understand, look inward and see how this dynamic, one, is happening, and two, how it's informing your actions, especially those that are prohibitive or inhibiting your productivity or a more fulfilling, flourishing life. So that's the core dynamic. Now, as we know, Nic has worked on this and his talk on procrastination. As you have said, and you've told me, the talk wasn't really on procrastination. Procrastination was just an example of self-worth theory. So I don't know if you want to speak about that a little bit. In the next slide we have here on self-image and how we try to deflect or protect ourselves.
Yeah, so I think that's the next good move. So like, okay, so how does self-worth theory unravel dynamics of imposter syndrome or procrastination or burnout over that results, say, from being overextended, or the power of being or not being self-efficacious, to have this belief that you're capable? Like, why is that so important? And how does it lead then counterproductively to procrastination? So people who procrastinate, for instance, are more highly motivated in general than people who are not. And that's very surprising to people. And so how does that make sense? And if you're a perfectionist, why would you not do the thing? If it's really important you be perfect, then you would do the work, not avoid it, right? Because you can't be perfect if you don't do it. So I always have this problem with perfectionism. It's not perfect. I don't think that's a useful term, because if you were truly a perfectionist and you embrace that, you would be doing all these things. The question is excessively high expectations. Well, where do those come from? Why do you need them? Why do you have to over compensate? Why do you have to attain more than a reasonable expectation or other people? What's underlying that? And self-worth can give a understanding of how that dynamic operates in a hopefully a compassionate and gentle way. This is not judgmental. It's to identify common human dynamics. But so in the case of procrastination, for instance, a starting point is, why do we keep doing something that on the surface seems counterproductive and harmful and maladaptive, but why do people keep doing it? And they say, okay, I'm going to stop procrastinating. And then they can't stop. So it's puzzling, it's vexing, and perplexing, and then they can't stop. That seems strange, right? So why is it that we can't stop doing this thing that we see as harmful and we want to stop doing, but we can't, right? That's a condition for a lot of people who are in a place where they feel like they cannot overcome procrastination. So that's a puzzle, actually, that needs to be understood at a deep level, because human beings can usually do the things they want to do. I want to pick up my cup. I pick up my cup. It happens. And it seems like we don't need to explain that. And obviously doing a complex task like writing a report or a paper, something's different. But the point is that if we observe people doing a pattern of behavior, a sequence that is somehow reinforced and keeps going, we have to say, well, why is that? What does that do for the organism, right? So sometimes I used to have a slide that said, procrastination, what's it good for? If you remember that song from the 70s, War, what's it good for?
Yeah.
Any case, but so what's it good for? And that actually, so if you start with the idea that human beings do things that have some function or benefit for them, then you have to ask that question. And that right there is rarely asked. Procrastination is assumed to be bad and wrong, and we should just get rid of it. well, wait a second, what does it do? How does it, and then how does it do that? Right? So procrastination, the argument is it provides some kind of protection. Well, what is it protecting? Because you're actually jeopardizing your performance, of course. If you put things off and you create these conditions by their choices, then you're actually you're playing a little game of chicken with the results. So that seems, again, on the surface, doesn't seem protective, but human self-protection is a pretty fundamental need. Well, what is what is protecting is your sense of your capability, right? So that's why it's important to have unpack self-worth in terms of an achievement context with this underlying interlocking set of beliefs that people have been socialized and internalized these beliefs that my ability is equivalent to my worth, and that my performance is indicative, though not perfectly, of my ability, because it's ability plus effort. And I would add, one of the solutions to alleviate this strong feeling of these high stakes is to say it's not just effort, it's strategies and methods and supports and resources and resourcefulness. But in any case, so one basic interpretation of why we procrastinate is because we've learned that if I achieve a high level, I will maybe feel guilty, but I will protect my sense of ability. And in fact, I may bolster it, which is what I did. I'm like, oh, I put it off and I still got an A. And I strut around and my friends are like, wow, you got an A, you didn't even study. And, how did you do that? You must be really smart, right? That's the attribution. You're smart. In fact, it demonstrates that you're smart by putting it off and then achieving anyways, proves how good you are. I can not work out and still get a 9.9 on my dive, or what have you, right? In any domain of achievement. And in fact, that's held up in our society as better. It's better to be a genius who doesn't have to try than it is to work hard in many circles, than it is to be very effective and work hard and focused. And that's good. That's admirable. That's virtuous. But it's better to be a genius. It's better to be a natural. I think this is widely evinced in our society. We see it a lot. And that's reflective of a social value that we've internalized. And so we want to be thought of as capable and able. That's really important in our society in the domains that matter to us. And so if I avoid, if I put off, if I create conditions that sort of self-handicap me, sometimes people say the word self-sabotage. I don't like that quite so much. We can come back to that. And then so my performance, my achievement is explained either way. So I can protect my sense of ability either way. So a great strategy is one that works regardless of the outcome. That's a great strategy. So if I achieve, fantastic. I was even smarter than I thought. If I don't, I have a ready excuse. Of course, I will need the excuse more. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying, because the worst thing that could happen is that this admission or that, yeah, I don't have the ability. Because then if I can't do it, then that affects my worth, and that's
highly shameful.
I
feel ashamed. I'm incapable. I don't belong. I'm not deserving.
So what I thought, I just want to make sure people get this, and because I'll superimpose our second slide here, is that what's really illuminating about what you've done here, Nic, is that it so easily leads to shame and judgments and condemnation of ourselves. And we're saying, no, like, these are, if you really understood what yourself, you would see that you are trying to protect yourself. And so that shouldn't lead to a judgment. It should lead to an understanding of yourself, and hopefully a way to say, oh, okay, I've got work to do here on my sense of self, that we can talk about a little bit later, where we created a whole course and a platform to do that. But if you don't understand the dynamic inside you, you're more inclined to condemn yourself and become shameful. And so by being aware of yourself and these internal dynamics can help explain what's going on. and why you're doing what you're doing, and hopefully not make you feel even worse about yourself.
That's right.
Right.
So I think one way to say it's understandable, right? So in fact, it's the norm. So most people procrastinate in these environments. So that's the norm.
Right.
So, and again, like this is not a point that's frequently, it's like, oh, 80%, it's like an epidemic. It's this disease and 80% of people have it. Well, another way to look at it is 80 to 90% of people procrastinate in college. So that's the norm. Let's normalize it. What's going on? What are the features of the situation? That doesn't mean you want it, but you can accept that we have the dynamics that lead to it are part of human beings in relation to these achievement contexts, number one. Number two, we can understand it and say it's not inevitable. There are people who don't procrastinate. In fact, all of us don't procrastinate. I really avoid the term procrastinator. Most of the time, actually, I procrastinated a lot when I was in college, but it was on a very relatively narrow segment of things, actually. In any case, the point being, so that's not my identity. That's not who I am. And that's a frequently a common move too, is to say, because I procrastinate, it's one thing, I'm a procrastinator. Now it's part of my identity. That's harder. You can see that's even woven in. But so it can be understood. You can understand it. And it's understandable. It's predictable, but not inevitable.
Right.
If you know how to intervene and understand what's really operating in terms of these dynamics on the one hand. And so that can normalize and remove and unhinder with the shame, the things that block us, these obstacles to making changes. And then the next idea is, okay, we can actually adjust our motivations. So intrinsic motivations often kind of neutralize these concerns about how we're being perceived as able or capable, and we imagine other people and their views of us. When we're lost in our work, when we are fascinated, when we actually say we lose ourselves, we get into a kind of flow state by virtue of the reasons why we're engaging, we just simply don't think about that camera, which reflects the perceptions of other people, we're just not aware of it. We're not thinking about it. So we're thinking about the task at hand, the painting or the running or the drawing or with lifting weights or whatever, me playing music and being lost in it, or writing the poetry or choosing the word. We're not thinking about this externalized vantage point on us, and therefore it decreases in significance. Other kinds of motivations, and this is, so this is getting at the motivational dimension of the 6 factors, right? Is when we work to serve others, altruism. We use, it's actually in the language. We say it's selfless, right? So we lose ourself in the task when we're in flow. It's selfless to act on it. Well, that's pointing to the fact that our sense of ourselves and being really attached to that is part of the issue. Now, it's also important, particularly in the West, in American culture, to have a strong sense of self and how to do that. But we might hold it a little bit loosely, or be aware that it's operating. I'm not saying forget that you have a self necessarily, although certainly some Buddhists do that. But we can recognize that a strong attachment isn't always helpful. We can notice where it's coming from.
Right. Yeah, and I think there's also this finite, infinite, eternal, temporal dynamic here. Like, because our sense of self is often a product of opposition to our live world. Like, I'm me and you're over there, and that helps define who I am. And where in a flow state, that dynamic of opposition dissolves. And so in a way, yeah, like I've lost myself, but actually no, it's just that I'm not so concerned about defining myself in opposition to these external things or whatever, so that you're free to just engage. Because I mean, this is another topic, but if there's this way of defining myself in opposition to something else, then it's, in a way, it can be a threat, because like if I invest myself in it, I could lose it. I understand that. So you're constantly trying. So and we see that in procrastination, right? Because I'm trying to preserve myself and protect myself. In a way, it's in opposition to whether this result will be what I need so the result that what it could bolster my self-esteem or it could damage it.
Right.
And so I know that, and so it's a bit of a threat. And so how do I protect myself no matter what the results are? And so so we're in a flow state. You don't need to worry about that because in a way there is a constant there. It's in the effort. It's intrinsic. It's in the activity itself. And so it's always accessible. And that's we kind of know that. And so that's why we can free ourselves and give ourselves completely to the task, which I don't know if I explained that well, but that's because that's kind of complex and deep, but I think that's I think we have to what we don't appreciate is ourselves. We are kind of wired a certain way, and we can kind of anticipate things or understand things, and so intrinsic motivations are inherently more fulfilling because we deep down understand that they're always there for us, so we can kind of give ourselves more to it. So anyway, I think I don't know if we've gone off topic here, but well,
I don't know if it's on topic. I mean, I would say it's off topic. I'd say that the first move is you're a philosopher and I'm a psychologist, and so you took it to the philosophy, and I think that's great. That's important. That's the defining feature of our approach.
Right.
So if somebody says, "Well, that's not practical," or "Why are you philosophizing?" That's the point.
Right.
That's where I would say, because we're talking about meaning and purpose. Those certainly psychologists who study that, and sociologists and anthropologists or whomever, but it's also the realm of philosophy and that human beings have these inherent needs to find and create meaning. We are meaning creating creatures. I'm not the first to say that. That's humanistic psychology. That's Viktor Frankl. That's many others. We are purposeful agents. We want to be part of a community, want to do things that matter to ourselves and other people. This is built into I would say, into the organism. And if we ignore that and say, oh, we just want to achieve, or we just want power, I think humans want those things, then we're not going to have an accurate understanding of ourselves or other people. And there's a psychological dimension of that and a philosophical dimension to that question, it seems to me. And I always appreciate that you bring me, because I'm inclined toward the philosophical, but I'm not as trained and skilled as you are. So I'm always refreshed, like, right, there's another level. I'm socialized to think like a psychologist, like, okay, what's the study and what's the dynamic? But that's not the whole of human experience.
Right.
So I don't think it's off topic. I think it's deepening the topic. And that, again, that's what we're talking about today to our listeners is what distinguishes what we do, where it's rooted in a deep philosophy about what it means to be a human being.
Right.
And I would say, if I could say my critique of some of these other positions, it's not that dopamine isn't operating in the organism or we're not habitual. The question is, are we reducible to our neurochemistry? The question is, are we reducible to our habits? And I would say clearly not. If you look inside yourself, those two frameworks cannot explain diddly of what's going on inside you. They just cannot do it. And if you examine and reflect and introspect on why you make choices and do things, I don't think they explain much of what's going on. And I think people resort to that because they're perplexed. They're like, I don't understand my own behavior. It must be a chemical. I don't understand my own behavior. It must be a habit.
Right.
There's something going on there. But here's another thing. Maybe you don't understand your own human motivations because you haven't been taught this framework. You've never heard it. And I think that's at least as good a potential explanation for anybody who wants to understand themselves and their actions better.
Right.
No, I would now get off my soapbox.
Your soapbox. Well, I think one last thing to kind of endorse our approach is that it would be easy without this approach to look at effortless perfectionism. You might not like the term, but like FOMO, imposter syndrome, procrastinations as separate and distinct issues. Like, okay, so, and then there's cognitive behavioral approaches for this, there's cognitive behavioral for that problem, so on and so forth, which is somewhat true. What we're saying is actually, no, there's a fundamental dynamic that actually connects, that manifests themselves in these things. And so they're inherently all related because you're struggling with the same issue, which is your self-worth. And though you might have strategies for overcoming them that are distinct to that particular behavior or that maladaptation, in the end, they are related, and we'll see a lot of crossover as you go deeper and deeper in terms of motivations and core beliefs and whatnot. So I think that's really unique and exciting about what we do. So
well put. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. All right. So we move on to slide number 3 of our
Yes.
5 slides. So, okay. So we have that philosophy. Nick and I have been wrestling with this for years. There's a lot more we need to learn, you know, and we learn from each other. It's really great. But what we did is, after Nick's talk on motivation, on procrastination really started to take off, we were like, okay, this is good market research. And I think at the time it was like, you know, who knows, it was even 1 million, but it was exploding. And I think you really tapped into something there. And so we're like, well, we should make this into a course. And so we went to work, and I don't know how long it took us to from start to finish. It took a long time for us to make the course, from creating the videos to editing the videos, but also how to create the actual platform. It would have been easy for us to record a bunch of videos and put it on some third-party platform, you know, that e-course platform that's out there, be it Udemy or, you know, something else. But we decided to create our own platform because I know for myself, well, one, you know, I code, and so I'm like, well, I don't want to pay. I mean, it was practical. I didn't want to pay for a third party. I'm like, well, I can just build it myself. So there was that motivation, but there was also the fact that we wanted to create as much interactivity in the courses as possible, because they, you know, if you've done an e-course, they tend to be somewhat passive. You watch a video, and then the only interaction you have might be some assessment or whatever after the video. And even, you know, a lot of the e-courses I've taken for coding, it's, you know, you're copying what they're doing on code. You're coding along with them, but you're copying what they're doing, which is okay. And it has its use. But I think in the end, I don't know, I find e-courses kind of, they're passive. They can be a little boring. And they're not really providing that way to really engage that we wanted for the folks on our platform. So we went about creating our own. And is that okay if I just kind of run here a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're the
Well, you're
driving
the
force
learning
behind that.
theorist, so I just want to respect that. But so for our first course, procrastination, there's actually a number of ways that we create interactivity. The first, which is true for all our courses, is that the video actually stops, pauses, and highlights a question for self-reflection that you don't have to, but you should, you know, hopefully you'll answer, and then you can restart the video. And so most videos either have 1, 2, at most 3 prompts. So there's this way that you're constantly engaging with the video, the material in the video itself. So that's one level of engagement. And in the procrastination course, because there's we go through 6 dimensions of the self, from context, cognitive, behavioral, emotions, motivations, and beliefs. I don't know if that's 6, but that's most of them. Each with their strategies. We created a drag and drop functionality, so you can actually decide which of those dimensions is the most important for yourself, and which strategies in that dimension are most important. And so you can drag and drop this whole matrix, and there's a picture of it on the slide. And then what's cool is that it takes the top 3 and constantly, it always shows you those 3. So no matter what page you are, or what video, what module, it's always showing your motivations. And also in addition to that, it has the, you know, why you're doing this course. It's always showing you that. So it's reinforcing, hopefully, you know, it's trying to reinforce why you're doing this course, what you're hoping to achieve out of this course, and then the particular strategies that for you right now are most important for you to try to overcome procrastination. And on top of that, given that, you know, yourself now is probably much different from where you're going to be in 2-3 years, we really want people to come back and to the course and work with, your motivation, the strategies might be different in 3 years that you'll need to overcome procrastination. So we really want the platform itself to be the tool that you use to help you overcome procrastination. Now, our second course is on creative problem solving, and that's going to be coming out hopefully by the end of this week or early next week. That one, it just has the interactions with the questions. But it's depending on the course, what type of we'll have those questions. That's a constant for every course. But in terms of what exercises or other interactive tools we have, it's dependent on the material in the course itself. Anyway, I'll stop. So anyway.
Yeah. So, I just might say a couple points here. Most classes are, whether online or not, and certainly in a college context, are information delivery. And they're, what I talk to students and talk about professors, they're called professors for a reason and not teachers. They profess, and profess is different than teach. So they deliver information, but what we're trying to do is engage people. That the platform is designed to do is to engage people in the processes, mental, emotional, motivational, that they need to change behavior. That's a different thing. So the focus is on the learner or the user and their processes. So if we look at procrastination from this point of view, what's going on in people internally, what processes do they need to go through to change those dynamics? That's very different than simply talking. It's part of that is explaining those dynamics, but there's other things. So we have people identify their motivations. We have people, we remind people of their motivations with the feature you just described. Well, that's actually very important. Think about how many times you've kind of we lost the thread. When we're thinking about our motivations, we're engaged, we're enthusiastic, we're excited about it, but that out of sight, out of mind, then it doesn't affect us. So that's a feature of the course and the platform. Hey, we need to be reminded of our motivations. It's a kind of, sticky note on our laptop that's reminding us not of the things I need to do, but why I'm doing them. And that's the process of being motivated. Right, we're fostering and facilitating and supporting you being motivated. That's a very different thing than me telling you about motivation, though. Again, that can be part of the process.
Yeah. So we worked hard on that platform. We were pretty excited about it, and we just think that it's unique. And again, and another feature of that is we present all this information. There is an information delivery, but then we're like, well, as you said, like we don't know you, and so we don't know what dimension of yourself is most important for you right now. That's part of your introspection. So, but we've created the platform provides a mechanism by which you can do that type of deep analysis and build or categorize or prioritize the strategies that are best for you and be reminded of that. So yeah, I think we're really excited about the platform. It's it would always be evolving, but yeah, we're pretty excited about it. Should we move on to the next slide, or is there more to discuss there?
Like you alluded to this, I would simply say that its platform is based upon how people learned for transformation.
Yeah.
Not learn to regurgitate facts.
Right.
And there's literature and research, and I'm aware of that. And you intuitively incorporated it, and then we systematically we're looking at the platform from that lens. And I think that is another thing that distinguishes our approach.
Cool. Okay, so then the next slide, we'll just touch on this briefly. Is you always have to do market analysis. And so we, did that. The e-course market is growing. It's huge. It's, $500 billion by 2030. Sounds great. We're obviously doing that, but there's a huge, huge problem. And that is completion rates for e-courses are abysmally low. I think in some contexts you might get 50%, but most of it's at 10% or even below 10%. And so, yeah, it's in especially amongst courses that we're offering. I think like technical courses, you might see higher completion rates, but the kind of courses we're offering, it's, it is definitely below 10%. And that's something I know that both of us have struggled with and wrestled with. And so where we hope to go is creating AI-driven virtual coach. And is that all right if I run with this for a little while? Okay. So I do a lot of coding, and I code, and integrating AI. It's been cool, really fun. I've actually built some agentic systems, platforms, and what we hope to do is basically flip the e-course model, where we have an AI virtual coach for you that you interact with, and that coach becomes more nuanced and more personalized and individualized to you as you are doing the courses and answering the questions and doing whatever interactive interaction we have in the course. As you do that, it can be more personalized. So, for example, hypothetically, if you have not done the worked with the matrix at all, it will know that in terms of the strategies for procrastination. So initially, it might be like, hey, you should go and look at the module 3 of the procrastination course and go through it and do that exercise. If you have done that, then it will remind you of that and perhaps say, well, is that dimension of yourself really, do you think that's the right one? It might offer some suggestions, so in that way, the coach is really, the interaction with the coach is the key thing. The courses and all the materials are what help that coach and you create a better, more fruitful interaction. And I think that's really exciting, because that, I think, will drive completion, because again, the more work you do in the courses, the more videos you watch and answer the questions, all the interactions, the better your coach will be for you. So I think that's great. I mean, we have all the transcripts from all our videos. We're developing more courses, more interaction, so it can use our general information, but also it will understand your profile and who you are, and then together, I think we will be able to create a pretty exciting offering for folks. So, I don't know, reaction, Nic?
Yeah, I think the couple points that I would highlight, you may have touched on them or not, I'm not sure. But so one of the ways, so I do coaching and I train coaches. So one of the key features of coaches is very individualized, this dialogic. The coach learns from the individual and actually prompts the individual to learn about themselves through questions that promote reflection, introspection, analysis, interpretation, and then they share that publicly, so that now I can hear that as a coach, and then I can combine that with my knowledge of motivation or what the task is, or strategies or skills or tools, and then together we can make something. So the coach what the power of the coach is the individualization, because I know all of those things and I do a workshop, but I just can't bring them to bear on each individual person. I know all the things I know as a teacher in a class that I know as a coach, but I can't apply that to 27 people. So it's not just what the coach knows, it's that it's individualized. It's the individualization of that guidance. And so this coach can do that. Now, that also is dependent upon what questions we ask in the class and elsewhere to get certain kinds of relevant information. And I think that goes back to the design of the platform. We're asking a different kind of question. Well, why? Because we have a different theory of why people behavior change, what leads to transformation, why they procrastinate. And so those questions are guided by that. So it's a coherent, aligned system of information that allows a coach, and a human coach or an AI coach, to provide a kind of input that's not obvious from other frameworks, because they're not asking the same questions. They're not saying, so I heard something about an AI coach the other day helping a student be more productive academically at an Ivy League institution. And they're saying, okay, oh, you don't study well in this location, go someplace else. What's a feature of a context in which you study well? Okay, sure. But is really that the biggest challenge people have in engaging and learning from the materials they're being taught in college? It's something I learned. I had to do that. I had to go hide, but that's not the main thing. But that's what you can, if those are the kinds of questions you ask, is your environment helping you study? No. Okay, then go someplace else. What are the features? But you can only, the coach can only provide that kind of input because it only asks those kinds of questions. Well, what theory of human learning and motivation and behavior change is leading that? It's very external. It's about habits. What are the external environment, right? Whether those people, I don't think they even knew that they were operating on that theory, but that's clearly the theory.
Right.
We have a very different theory, and we have a very explicit theory. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So, I mean, just when we kind of came upon this idea, it caused us to redo the whole creative problem solving course. Initially, we were just gonna, because we're operating for free, initially we were just gonna make it a bunch of videos. But then we're like, no, this is really tapping into, fear-based responses to challenges and whatnot. And so it needs to have that same level of interactivity via the questions. So the questions, again, and they're not theory questions, because we do talk about, there is a strong, heavy theory component to the class itself. We actually look at John Dewey's framework versus this guy named Jim Loader. There's a rubric for what he calls transformational logic that we employ for understanding how we do creative problem solving. But the questions are geared towards, well, do you understand Jim Loader's
right?
This like theory? No, it's like, what does this mean for you? How does it? They're introspective type questions. And again, that is great for you right now because it's encouraging introspection. But it will hopefully help you as you develop a virtual coach, that it is a coach. It's there to help you and guide you, and remind you of various videos or points or even things that you've said about yourself. All will be protected. Again, I'm very versed in how to code with AI and create RAG systems and everything else. So it will be protected. And again, this is not going to happen anytime soon. We're still trying to develop materials, but we're pretty excited about it. I think it's a pretty innovative approach to overcome low completion rates, and more importantly, to help people with these core issues and how they manifest and lead to less than fulfilling lives.
So. Yeah, I think it extends and enhances impact, right? If you have a personal, we know that you need to personalize what we're communicating to you for it to be optimally impactful. And then we have a tool that helps you do that.
Right.
That goes further than the questions that we can offer, which I think are good, well-conceived questions that lead to self-awareness and self-knowledge. But it's the next question that we can't ask, right? Based upon your response to that. We can't do that. We can't put that in on a slide or into the video because we don't know what your answer is. But a coach can be responsive to that and so it's really dialogic, and we're going deeper, or we're examining different scenarios. That's in interaction. And so that's what I would do in a coaching session. But of course I can't do that at scale.
Right.
Or you would do it at a coaching session. Yeah.
Well, no, but both, yeah. I mean, and I'm excited about it because I know for me, I did a lot of coaching, based at Little League and whatnot, and that kind of stuff. And the most exciting part of coaching for me was the diagnostic component and really working with the individual, and they're struggling with hitting or struggling with throwing, whatever, and just being able to really observe them and understand them as an individual and make a change instead of these kind of general do this, okay, let's really digging in and figuring out how I help this individual, and that was really exciting, and to see them really grow and gain more confidence was really exciting. So that's why I'm super excited about where we're going with Voge Academy. So anyway, all right, so should we call it there? Good.
I think so. Yeah, we've given a very comprehensive analysis. We get 3 minutes on next week, so we gotta condense this, Matt.
Right. Well, but I want to encourage, if anyone's in the Princeton area, to come on by next Wednesday in the morning to the multipurpose room, which is in the basement of Frist Campus Center at Prince University. We'll be there. We'd love to talk with you and just, share more about Vogue Academy and hear your feedback. And then that night in the Frick atrium, which is the chemistry building next to the football stadium, we'll be, I think that's it, from 5 to 7 or 8 or something like that. But we'll be there. Again, love to talk with you. Please leave comments, reach out to us, hello@vogueacademy.com. Sign up on our website so you can, get updates from us. Like we said, our creative problem solving course is pretty much ready to go. We've got a few more tests we got to run, and then we'll let it go. And that course is free. And just again, thank you. Share our YouTube channel with your folks at work, your friends, family. Let's continue to grow this community and really get the word out about what we're doing here. So, Nic, any last words before we go?
I think I just say that one thing that emerged from me that is we're going deep. We're not going to dumb it down for you. We respect your intelligence, and I think that's necessary. This
Right.
theory and these ideas aren't our pontification. There, the basis of change is you having a deep understanding of yourself and human being, and as a human being, that means understanding human beings. So that stood out from our conversation today.
Yeah, amen. Awesome. Well, Nic, as always, thanks so much, and
Thank you, Matt.
until next time, take care.